Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Well, hello there. It's Zoe, and welcome back to the show. And welcome back to me. It has been one day since I've been out of the bush on my 2-week adventure on the Australian Alpine Walking Trail with 5 of my buddies. And more on that next week when I do a full solo-sode. At the moment, I'm still recovering. I'm going to have a week off, stretching, relaxing, recovering my poor little feet, which are a little battered, but it was extraordinary. So I'm very excited to be back home. Yes, desperately missing the big, wild, open spaces where all we have to do is get up, feed ourselves, and walk and enjoy the views. Very simple life. And yet that is balanced with the very complex life that I return to that is offering leadership insights. So without further ado, back at it. My guest today is Rhiannon D'Averc, and she is an author, a ghostwriter of fiction and nonfiction. She has over 100 books to her name. But before we get into my fabulous interview with her, where I geek out on all things books and writing, what's happening on Planet Human? Well, Planet Human, a nice little excerpt that Jules has sent through. The Australian Research Council of Excellence in Plants for Space, otherwise known as RCEPS, is investing $35 million over 7 years to figure out how we can better feed our astronauts and grow plants in space. Of course, I'm fascinated by this topic. It features in both the Olympus Project and Olympus Bound as a key element of how people will function in space in the future. Alongside of RCEPS, we have the University of Melbourne, which is investing in farm bots, how we can automate production and growth of plants in space, and looking at organic material that can be used to 3D print food in space. This is a big deal because if we go to the moon, say, there's not a lot of organic material available. It's basically what we bring with us to the table that we can produce things with. And that in Olympus Bound creates some problems when we need to 3D print some medical applications, let's say, no spoilers. And all you can use is what's at hand, which basically means organic material is the human body and plants. So what can you recirculate, reuse, repurpose, grow, and expand from what you have brought with you? It's pretty complex stuff. In any case, there are actual live humans working on that project as we speak in Australia, supporting our expansion into space as a species. Very cool. On Planet Zoe, little excerpt. Yes, I'm back from my 2-week trip. And right before that was 10 days in Bali, which was a complete contrast of luxury and luxuriating in hot, hot, hot weather. And that was also a great break and a great immersion in a different culture, which was fabulous. More pressing next week is, after what seems like forever, Olympus Bound officially launches on May the 1st. The ebook will be available from Amazon on May the 1st. I'm going to celebrate with a Facebook Live, which I've never done before. What could go wrong? Possibly everything, but we're going to have a crack. You can register for that event. It's free on my website. We'll have a link in the show notes. And come along and find out a little behind the scenes stuff about how I put together the book, some of the real life inspiration behind some of the design of the Olympus project and its building on the moon. Yeah, so really based in real science. Very cool. And there'll be some giveaways and some fun stuff as well. I'm also hosting a live in-person book launch, which I haven't done since about 2017, for the book on May the 30th at the Shine Dome here in Canberra. Both those links will be available in the show notes. And so if you're in Canberra around on May 30th from 5:30 to 7, I've got drinks, I've got canapes, I've got scintillating insights, an opportunity to buy and also win the book when you are there. So that's all happening on Planet Zoe. So without further ado, the question I have for you is how can you get your ideas and messages out to more people? Hint, hint, it may be with a ghostwriter, and Rhiannon is here to share her secrets with us. Let's do it. Well, all the way from East Sussex, welcome to the show, Rhiannon D'Averc.
Thank you.
Do you like how I purred that out? I just love your last name, Rhiannon D'Averc. It sounds so salubrious. It's fantastic. Well, we've got lots to talk about as a fellow writer, and you're in the trade for a long time. How did you get started as an author and a ghostwriter?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Everybody always, I think, in my life knew that I was going to be a writer. And I decided to have a little rebellion moment when I went to uni. I studied photography at uni, just to prove everybody wrong. So I finished uni on the Friday, and on the Monday, I started my first full-time job as a copywriter. So the rebellion went great. And then from there, it was full-time, but it was kind of freelance, right? So it was kind of flexible. So from there, I started to get more freelance clients. And within the first year, someone said to me, have you ever thought about writing a book? Could you write one for me? And I said, I'll give it a go. And the rest was history.
Wow. And how many books have you actually written, either under your own name or as a ghostwriter?
Yeah, so we're over 100 published now.
And you look about 12.
I count that all the time. I'm 33, I will say. Yeah, people always think, you can't have possibly been doing this for 13 years. How could you? No. Yeah, and there's probably about 20 or so books that never got published because they were terrible, that I wrote right back at the beginning.
So let me just put this 120 books, some published, some not in years. How many that do the math? That's like 10 books a year.
Yeah. I kind of average around a book a month. Not all the time. Sometimes I have projects that are a bit more in depth and take a bit longer. But yeah, I'm usually, alongside client projects, I'm usually writing something that I'm intending to put out under my own name at the same time. So yeah, it's quite full on.
God. How?
Yeah.
Tell me about your process.
First of all, I don't sleep a lot. So, don't try this at home. But over the years, I've really streamlined my process to make it go as fast as possible. So, for example, I know that I can type very fast. That's just something that comes with experience. I can type about 500 words in about 20 minutes. So what I have to do then is to remove as many roadblocks as possible that are going to stop me from knowing what to write in those 20 minutes so that I can just go through without having to stop and think. So that starts with doing a really good foundation and a really good structure. So whether it's fiction or nonfiction, every book needs a chapter outline, and I try and make them quite detailed so that I know what research I need to do. I know what I need to talk to the client about, what I need to ask them, and I can get that information into the outline before I even start to write. And once I do start to write, I can just sit down at my desk and just type as fast as I can.
Well, I think that's got great application to no matter what work you're doing as a leader. I'm thinking about leaders, same principles. Organize your systems, remove roadblocks. And yeah, that's still quite amazing. If you're ghostwriting, you're writing in somebody else's voice. What is that like to get into somebody else's head? And how do you go about that process of embodying their personality and their expressions?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's one of the real challenges for me of doing this type of work that I really get into. So it starts with interviews, one-on-one, hearing them speak, watching their body language. How do they phrase things? And as I'm making notes, I will literally write down word for word phrases that catch my ear. Do they say this thing a lot? Is this an idiom that they use? And start to build a picture. Do they sort of speak in short sentences? Do they pause meaningfully as they're speaking? Things like that. And then I just figure out how to translate that down on the page. And it also helps if there's someone that's done, blog posts or LinkedIn posts or whatever it might be as part of their business. I can actually look at their own natural writing style. And obviously, if they're hiring me, maybe not the best natural writer, and that's okay. I can take the basis of what their natural style would be and then just polish it up and make sure that it's got all the correct grammar and, everything that you would want from the structure to make it sound like a professional book. But still then.
I always wondered about ghostwriters and how quite often you're not allowed to declare yourself as the actual author or the writer of the book. How do you go about dialing down your ego? That's what occurred to me, because so much work goes into producing a book, writing a book. What's that like for you, not being able to claim I wrote that thing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's something that over time I've got more and more used to, and it doesn't bother me at all now. I don't think it really bothered me much at first either, but the thing at first that always used to get me was when people made edits or changed something that I'd come up with. I remember I wrote this Regency romance, and it was for a publisher. They knew what they wanted to publish, but they didn't have anyone submitting that kind of work, so they just hired me to do it. And I came up with this amazing name for one of the characters, and they were just like, let's call him Christopher. But I put so much work into choosing the name. So those kind of things used to be very painful. But I think over time it's just a job, right? Like, so I turn up, I do the work. And if you're sitting at a desk in any other kind of job, the work leaves your desk and it's no longer yours. It just goes into whatever the company is doing. So it's the same kind of thing. I just had to take some time to learn not to be personally affected by stuff.
Yeah, look, editing is a fraught process where you've got to sometimes, well, if you're contracted, suck up somebody else's decision, which can be quite annoying. But let's talk about working with experts who are future oriented. And you mentioned in our conversation before we got on to the show that you have quite a few authors or experts who do want to talk about the future. How do you go about capturing those ideas and getting them down on a paper to share them with a wider audience?
So the obvious way is to do a business book and just talk about, what that vision is. But I had one client who did something really exciting, and I hope I get more projects like this. We actually wrote a sci-fi novel. So we used the technology that he was coming up with, that he was developing, as an instrumental technology as part of this sci-fi novel. It was one of the things that was central to the whole novel. Without giving too much away, because I can't speak to certain details, but the characters use this technology again and again and again throughout the book. And that was really exciting.
Wow. So why did they choose to write sci-fi instead of like a technical book or a business book?
To reach more people, I think, was our kind of consensus. Not to say that it has to be boring, but if you write a boring business book, right, you're probably only going to attract the attention of people who are already interested in your industry. So if you're going to write a novel, that is going to reach so many more people, and people from different walks of life as well. And also, I think it's just more exciting, isn't it? If someone comes up on LinkedIn and says, I've just put out this book, it's about the thing that I do, it's a nonfiction, you kind of go, oh, wow, congratulations to them, I might check it out. But if you see someone's put out a novel, that's exciting. That's really exciting, no matter who you are.
I'm glad you have so much enthusiasm for it, because this was my exact same rationale to start publishing novels myself. I've written 4 leadership books, nonfiction, and then I had this sort of middle of the writing my 4th book, People Stuff, question in my head going, I wonder if I can reach more people or make a bigger impact through fiction, because stories have such an emotional impact. And I know that from being an avid reader myself. When I read a really powerful fiction story, I'm moved by it. It stays with me. I niggle at it and so on. So has your science fiction author managed to reach more people? Like, was there a commercial interest in the topic? Tell me a little bit about the production of the book and how it landed.
Yeah, I don't know too much because, unfortunately, some clients will keep me in the loop for a long time afterwards and, share me all their victories, but some clients don't, and this was one of the ones who quite didn't. But, it seemed to go down really well, at least from what I saw. It was an exciting premise that he'd come up with, and by the way, it was his story. He came to me and said, this is kind of the main gist of the story that I want to do. Can you just fill in the details and, make it more novel-like? But the story that he'd come up with was fantastic in the first place, which is why I leapt to the project. So yeah, I think it went down really well. Fantastic.
And so the reason why he came to a ghostwriter is because he wasn't a very good or an accomplished or an experienced fiction writer, or what was the motive?
Yeah, there was that. And then I think also time. So he was part of a startup, obviously developing this technology. I think they were in seed phase from what I remember. So he had a lot on his plate. And he knew that he wanted things to be launching at certain times in order to keep up with the time frame that they wanted and to keep bringing that interest up as they went through different phases. So it was, he couldn't do everything at once. And so he knew that the best way to get it all done in the way that he wanted it to be done was to outsource some of the work. Just like anything else, I guess, in a project.
Yeah, I take writing so personally. I'm like, oh, yeah. But I guess if it's not a personal vocation for you, of course, outsource that sucker. And so, have you done any other sci-fi projects?
Yeah, I have. I'm just trying to think if there's any that I can say anything at all about. It's really difficult being a ghostwriter actually, because you do work on some really cool stuff, and then they make you sign a massive ironclad NDA. God, dang it! I want to just point to it in bookstores and say this was me, but I can't. But yeah, I've done some other sci-fi stuff. I've done some young adult sci-fi as well, actually, which is quite interesting. Very different.
Tell me about how different is young adult to adult sci-fi?
I think, and especially because of who the client was, he was all about the technology, right? So the adult book is more thriller-like. There was constant action, tension. There was a romantic subplot, which obviously we were able to take further than you would in a young adult book. The young adult book dealt with, I don't want to say less serious, because you can still deal with, heartbreak and friendship and loyalty and bravery and like big concepts in young adult books. But the technology was really dealt with a lot more seriously in the adult book. Like we were actually showing how things worked. Whereas in the young adult book, it's kind of more like, this happens, just accept it for story reasons, let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious about that too. So in terms of, do you write under your own name as well as Rhiannon D'Averc?
I do, yes.
Okay. And what kind of books do you write under your own name?
Yeah, so I've done a true crime book, which is my first one that I ever put out. And since then, I do more romance. I did some crime romance and then some just romance. I kind of transitioned through the genres like that.
And how do you manage the marketing side of things on top of all your writing projects?
Most of the time I don't. Honestly, I'm really bad with it. I actually put some effort in on my most recent series and got a bestseller with the first book in the series. And I was like, oh, maybe I should have been putting in this much effort the whole time. I kind of tend to focus on what I'm working on at the minute. So when I've finished my own book, I'm like, okay, it's published. Bye. What's the next time? Just gone, out of sight, out of mind. But yeah, I am getting better around it.
Well, if it's not your own published fiction is not your main source of income, it's the ghostwriting, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yeah. I probably could be a lot more 50-50 split if I did put the effort in, but I don't know. One day I'll get there.
And what's holding you back? Is it the marketing aspect of having to market your own work as opposed to?
Yeah, I think I love writing so much that if you give me the choice between, like, you could make enough money for a year from one book, but you'd have to spend all of the rest of the year marketing. Or you can write 5 books and make the same amount of money. I'll write the 5 books because I just want to be doing it every day.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And what was your marketing effort? Now I'm getting into brass tacks here around the marketing,
yes.
The book industry. So what were your marketing efforts consisting of?
Yeah. So I did quite a lot of small things that all built up. So I had an ARC campaign with hidden gems. I did a BookBub featured deal, which was huge. That was definitely the biggest thing that I did. Smaller adverts on Amazon and on BookBub. And I started a newsletter on Substack just to promote this book series. And I did a lot of tie-in stuff, lots of social media videos, so many social media videos.
Were you on TikTok?
Yes, TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, just everywhere. I mean, you can tell from my voice, I'm not as passionate about it as I am the writing.
And when you're doing videos for your books, is that like you on screen talking about the book? Like what kind of videos do you do?
Yeah, I try and do a bit of a mix, but I do try and be on screen as much as I can because I think from what I've seen, those do best. People can connect with me as a person, I think, and that's especially because I write across genres. It's a lot more important for them to connect with me as a person rather than just one book, because that way they might follow me into if they read my romance, they might follow me into my crime romance and vice versa. But yeah, sometimes, woken up late, haven't had time to do my makeup or my hair, I'm just going to do a video of a book, just not looking at myself at all.
Yeah. So when you are doing videos of your book, is it you reading the book? Is it you just chatting about the book?
Quite often I just sort of tell people about it. I kind of imagine like, this person has never heard of me before. What am I going to tell them that's going to make them interested to go and find the book? Because they have to go and find it as well. You know, if it's on social media, it's not, most social media websites, you can't just click on a link. They have to actually at least go to your bio, and, you know, you have to make them want to.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. Well, thank you for that brass tacks publishing world stuff.
Yeah.
All my leadership listeners are going, And well, what's relevant for the leadership listeners is that sometimes we have to get into the weeds about how we are getting our messages across. And if it's a business, sometimes it's about thinking innovatively about how you get your message out there, which is, for example, using science fiction to reach a broader audience. So what are some of the more interesting ideas or perspectives that you have worked with different clients, maybe around the future or maybe in different topics?
Yeah, I do really get excited by the types of technology that people are talking about. I actually worked with a top banking or financial person. Again, I'm trying to be very careful about what I'm allowed to say, sort of financial figure. And we worked on a book about his vision for where finance is going to go. And the way that he explained things as we're going through the book, because I'm not really, you know, I have an accountant for that. I don't know anything about finance. And he said things that linked it back to TikTok, for example, actually, and used an analogy that made me understand it. And I went, oh, wow. But then what was really cool was because then he said where he thinks the future of finance is going. And I went, okay, well, if I carry on that analogy in my own head, this is where the future of social media is going. Wow. Okay. That's incredible. And now I'm just waiting to see if it happens, you know.
What is the future of social media then?
Well, decentralised. I can't remember exactly what it was. That there was a really cool concept. This was a couple of years ago now, but there was a really cool concept that he came up with about the way that we'll access things like social media. And it won't be, do you post on TikTok? Do you post on Instagram? It will be, you post yourself on your page, I guess, but anyone can access it from anywhere because it's not tied to a platform or a device even. Yeah, really cool. I can't even wrap my head around it properly, but I love it.
Right. Okay. And is it kind of blockchain the technology sitting behind it?
Yeah. And I think it's the next generation of that. So not even quite as we're seeing it now, but, you know, an evolution of that.
Yeah. Okay. That just made my brain work a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
So
right?
Social media through blockchain. So blockchain is an infrastructure that allows different transactions to be logged, etc. So it's a way of authenticating your digital self, I'm guessing.
Right, exactly. So it can be linked to your signature rather than having to have an account on every single site out there. You can just have that one thing that's you.
Oh.
Very cool.
except that there are different blockchains. So it's got to be the one blockchain to rule them all. It's got to come to the fore.
Exactly. Or they have to start communicating with each other better.
Yeah, which they don't at the moment.
No.
Okay. Oh, that was a cool little rabbit hole to go down. So when you're working with an author or with a human who wants to have a book out into the world to explore ideas, how do you help them cherry pick the stories? Let's say you're working on a nonfiction book and you want to bring their premise, their ideas to life. Stories are a way to do that. How do you help them select the stories that are going to light the idea up?
Yeah, so normally I would start by just explain it to me, you know, the way that you would a colleague, or, you know, some people have done talks already or presentations on their subject. So I say, okay, take me through that. And as we're going through, I will figure out what the approximate size and shape of a chapter is. And each chapter really needs to be supported by stories. You can't have, you know, 3 stories in one chapter and then the next one has none. You've got to support what you're saying continuously with story, whether it's case studies or whether it's, you know, an example of a fictional person that we're going through the book with, or whatever it is, you need something. So then if they haven't already told me lots of stories that I can choose from, it will then be about me going in those interviews and saying, tell me about this. Tell me an example of this that you've seen in real life. Or, tell me what happens when you do this. Have you seen that happen? Can you imagine what would happen? And we go from there.
Do a lot of people have struggle finding those stories? Like, is that something that's problematic?
No, actually, I think most people think they would struggle before they go into it. They think, oh, I don't know anything. It's that imposter syndrome that talks to us in the back of our heads. But actually, if you're enough of an expert in your subject that you want to write a book about it in the first place, you will have those stories somewhere in the back. And it's when I call out those specific questions that they go, oh, yeah, well, I have seen that. And I worked on that with a client. It's just the same as like when you ask me questions now and I go, oh, yeah, there was that one book.
Okay. When I'm talking to leaders too, often we forget that how powerful stories are just to illustrate a concept. I know I'm guilty of that for sure. I get so lost in ideas, and just telling a story about how you can bring it to life just makes it more digestible and memorable. Rhiannon, here's a different kind of question. You've worked with, well, if you've written 100 books, that's 100 clients. What have you learned about people in that process?
I love that question. Do you know what I've learned about people is that we are all the same. We all have, it doesn't matter who I've worked with, whether it was that banker who's at the top of his field, whether it is, I'm working right now with a woman who was an asylum seeker who came to the UK, and then we're telling her story. I've worked with just a guy that was a publisher. I've worked with so many different people from all walks of life, lawyers, coaches, everybody. We always, as we're talking, will find something that I go, yep, I've had that too. I've experienced that. I've felt that too. Even, the asylum seeker client that I'm working with right now, when she first came to the country, she ended up living in Hatfield, which is a small town in the middle of nowhere. And I went, yeah, I know Hatfield. I went to uni there. There will always be some connection that we can find, no matter how far apart our lives seem.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm so glad I asked that question. Rhiannon, are you ready for the Fast Five?
Oh, no. Maybe. Let's find out.
Okay. What's the future technology you most want right now?
Available Wi-Fi literally wherever you are with no service interruptions, because that is the bane of my life.
Yeah, especially since we had some at the beginning of this show. Got it. Okay. Yes. Yeah, we can talk about all these great tech, but without reliable Wi-Fi at the moment, it's a major obstacle. Yeah. Okay. Number 2, best tip you ever got for leadership.
Everybody is fallible. No matter what your education level is, what your background is, where you're from, what you think, what level of IQ you have, everyone can make mistakes. So if you're in a leadership position, don't assume that you're the one that's always in the right.
I love it. Yeah. Especially when you think you are in the right, that's probably when you're wrong.
Right.
Okay. Number 3, what's one problem in the workplace you'd love to wave a magic wand and be fixed right now?
Can I say technology for the second time? I don't know. I should think of something different. I don't really have any problems in my workplace. That's the problem here, because I work with such lovely people for an hour a month, and that's it. We don't need to see each other outside of that. So my workplace is pretty simple. Sorry.
So can I just check something around that then? So you work with them for an hour a month. This is the person who you're writing a book for. You meet with them for a month, you interview them, etc., and then you go away and write the project and just communicate over email. Is that how your workflow goes?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't even really need to communicate much between the interviews, aside from just making sure we've set the next interview up, because I'm just working way behind the scenes and they are doing what they do in their own business.
Okay. All right. And you work from home, or have you got an office?
I do work from home, yes.
Okay. You're living the ultimate freelancer's dream world.
I am.
Okay. Number 4, thumbs up or down. Who's a leader that you see is doing something right, or a leader that sucks and is doing something wrong?
I'm going to go political for a moment. I'm going to say Rishi Sunak is doing pretty terribly right now as a leader. He's really lost the faith of his party, which obviously is the biggest no-no possible if you're a politician.
What do you think has contributed to that?
How long have we got? Wow, yeah, so much stuff. I mean, if we're being absolutely fair, he inherited a party that was already crumbling, but he also kind of seems to just be lining his and his wife's pockets as much as he possibly can before the ship fully goes down.
Okay. Yeah. That deserves a thumbs down. All right. Thank you very much. Well, number 5, what's your, how do you talk to a copywriter, not a copywriter, a ghostwriter and author about your favorite leadership book or podcast? So have you got a favorite leadership book?
I am going to be a completely boring person and say Atomic Habits, which is probably what 90% of people say, but it is really good.
It is quite good. Yeah. It is quite a good book. What do you like about it as a writer?
I like actually the stories, funnily enough, considering what we were saying a moment ago. It's the way, I think in the very first chapter, he tells a story about how the cycling team managed to go from being utterly terrible to the best in the world, just using a simple habit technique. And that kind of story, that's incredible. That headline is amazing. So yeah, the way he uses stories is really, really good. And one thing that he does that I always tell my clients to do if possible is that he has those extra resources on his website. And every chapter, it's, if you want to know more about this, go to my website, give me your email address, have these resources for free, which is marketing gold.
It is marketing gold. You are absolutely right. The story about the cyclist makes me want to go back and reread the book. I haven't read it in a couple of years now, so time to go back and look at it. Do you have a favorite fiction book? And what genres do you read in?
Oh my gosh. Now that is a lot harder. Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. I said it was harder, but then I immediately named something. I don't know where that came from. Yeah, I read a lot of genres, actually. Fantasy, romance, young adult. If anything looks interesting to me, I will pick it up and read it and give it a chance. A lot of crime as well. Yeah, I read a lot.
Thank you for sharing. Well, that was the Fast 5. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. See you there. So, Rhiannon, what question would you like me to ask that I haven't asked yet?
I guess, how long does it take to write a book? We kind of briefly touched on it, but it's a big one for my clients because I'm not going to generalize, not all of them at all. But every now and then I will get someone that's like, so I need a book to coincide with my talk that I'm giving next month. Can we? Like, no, we cannot. That's not going to happen. Even if I can do it in a month, you have to remember, we have to do a research and structure phase before I can start writing. Then we have to do interviews, which means that you, the client, have to be available for me to interview. Otherwise, I'm not going to have the information. So if someone's a busy professional, usually, realistically, it does take 6 months to get those meetings in anyway.
Okay, so that's a good question. So 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the phases. So there's the research phase, the interview phase, there's the writing phase, there's the editing phase. You haven't talked about that piece.
Oh, yes.
So from start to finish to book in hand, how long does it usually take with you for a client?
Yeah, 6 months from the date that we agree the project. Obviously, so I do an introductory, I don't say obviously because you wouldn't know. I do an introductory service first, which I call a strategy session, which is when I put together the outline. And that's when we determine how are we going to work together if we're going to work together. So at that point, we may not decide to go forward at all. But once we do, oh, look, we've already done the first part of the work. So that's great. So from that point is 6 months. And it can easily get longer than that if there's any kind of delay. And obviously, as I say, with busy entrepreneurs, yes, there are often delays. There are often times when we have to cancel and push back meetings a few times in a row, and then I can't get the information that I need to actually write the next section of the book. So I generally add in about a month's extra time, just in case. So maybe 6 to 7 months. And that's to get the digital, if you like, manuscript in your hand. If we're going to actually publish it, that's going to be a little bit extra as well.
Okay. And do you use somebody else to edit, or do you do the edits yourself?
I leave it up to my clients. So I am a professional editor as well. Obviously, it's not as good to edit your own work. So what I usually say is I have edited it to the best of my ability. If you want to be absolutely sure that this is the best book it can be, you can actually hire another editor, and here are a list of people that I recommend. Whether they take me up on it or not is obviously up to them. It's their item at the end of it. That's their product that I've created for them, but it is no longer mine. It's theirs now. So they can mistreat it if they wish.
Okay. So coming back to your process then. So it takes 6 months basically from first meeting through to here's your digital manuscript, and you're writing a book a month. Does that mean you have all these ongoing projects and you're tic-tacking between them?
Yeah. So I generally have no more than 2, maximum if it's a really urgent job, 3 clients at a time. But as I say, I do write my own projects. So whenever I have downtime, I then squeeze in one of my own books and try and write it. And it's usually horribly disjointed and a bit here and a bit there and a bit there where I can fit it in. But, the client work comes first.
Okay, got it. Wow. Rhiannon, this was awesome. It's so nice to talk to somebody who is just immersed in the writing world and has taken that on board. I love your observations about humans, that we are all the same and that everyone is fallible.
Right.
I think those are great insights about people. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, so I have, oh my gosh, everything is under my very unspellable name, so apologies for that. But I'm on Rhiannon.A for my website, and just at Rhiannon D'Averc on Instagram, TikTok, many other places that I don't really actively go on, but mostly just those 2.
Okay, awesome. All right, we'll put a link to your website and your unpronounceable, unspellable name in the show notes. So if you're interested, people can have a look there. Rhiannon, this is great. I love talking all things books and writing, and it's been a pleasure to get to meet you and to hear your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that was super fun to geek out with Rhiannon on all things books and writing. And there's some takeaways for leadership. The big one for me is stories, how important stories are to illustrate an idea. And bringing those to life is something that we can all use to communicate what's most important to us. And the second piece was a pragmatic one, is remove the roadblocks. So how can we get deep focus so that we can buckle down and do the work that really matters? In terms of an excerpt or a tip from my world, my books, I'm going to read a little bit from Olympus Bound. So here we go. Humans, when placed at the helm of responsibility, often grapple with a duality, the self they once knew and the leader they are now required to be. In this chasm, the true tenor of leadership resounds. Athena AI, Olympus Log. The moon's face was a hag's chalky mask, cracked and lifeless, brutal against the impenetrable black depths of space. Xanthi squinted in the glare of the stark white surface to the eastern wing of Olympus, leaving boot prints in little puffs of moon dust behind her. Ahead of her, hanging on the horizon like a big, fat blue eye, was the earth. Xanthi paused. A familiar frisson of awe shot through her as she gazed at the precious, watery globe. There, on the tiny blip in space, was all of humanity, all of Earth's creatures, foraging in the creeping greenery and swimming in the swollen rolls of the oceans. And here we are on the moon, planting a bit of humanity, a bit of life, a bit of Earth on this implacable boulder. Xanthi resumed her bounding. They called it moondling, a combination of walking and trundling. It definitely took practice to get it right. 6 months on the moon, and the novelty had still not worn off. She skipped and felt the joy of effortless movement. Well, not quite effortless. It was still awkward in the thick spacesuits and challenging to stay balanced. Like the other Olympus crew, she often stumbled and found herself face first in the dust. "Hey, Xanthi, can you confirm your location?" Jonas's voice was a little hoarse, Xanthi noticed, no doubt due to the boisterous shouting he had done in the sim room with the others the night before. They'd watched a football game broadcast from Earth and joined through a virtual reality uplink. They had bet chocolate rations on the outcome, and Xavier, as usual, had won the pool. That's it for the moment. That's sort of the opening couple paragraphs of Olympus Bound. So yes, the crew have made it to the moon. They've been there 6 months, and stuff is about to go down. All right. Well, with all that in mind, I hope you have a fantastic day and week ahead. In the meantime, get a book, read a book, write a book, get a book, read a book, write a book. Live through stories, that's for sure. And in the meantime, after that, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.